Hey, this is Marty, and this is the last of the series in building the swing game. I was going to do one or two more, but then I decided I was just going to skip to the game. So at the end of last time, I had added a ball, and since then, I've been working on adding paddles, implementing key binding to move the paddles, um, checking to see if the ball hits the paddle, and also adding the capability to keep score. So I'm just going to skip right to the end and show you guys the game, and then we'll go over some of the things I did. So let me just start it. Okay, so we have Pong and start button to play. And I'm going to start it and then pause it quickly. So start, pause. So I've implemented two paddles, a left paddle and a right paddle. Also, I think last time the ball just moved horizontally across the screen. I added a Y component. It was just like the motion X that I added last time, except the ball now moves on the X and Y axis. The paddles as well. Let me just start. Uh, the game will just run by itself. So I've bound the W and S keys on the left side to paddle 1. And you can see I've got some system out print lines that kind of show you what I'm doing when I'm hitting the key. So I'll show you a little bit about key binding. That's a pretty interesting concept. And on the right, it's the up and down. So let's see if I can play a little bit. The score just gets updated when the ball hits the wall. It doesn't really restart. It just continues. Oops, that was a score. So let's hit pause. So that's the complete game. There's a lot more that we could do. I just wanted to kind of get to a point where I could show you a complete uh, product. Okay, so a couple of things to mention. Number one, the paddles. The paddles are pretty much like the ball. They have there's a speed component. That's how fast the paddle moves vertically, a width and a height. There's a player number associated with the paddle. Player 1 is left, player 2 right, and because the players and the paddles are kind of mixed together, that's where I put a score property. There's also motions and positions just like the ball. The other thing about a paddle is it has to understand how to move on the y-axis only. Um, and it has to have a render method, and the render just creates a rectangle. Um, Instantiating the paddle, we're creating two paddles, paddle 1, paddle 2, and in the panels paint component method, that's where, so if you remember, there's a timer that calls paint component, or paint component's called whenever the screen is resized or moved. So um, the paddle positions, when the paint component method is called, the paddle positions are moved to the new position based on where the key binding actions have moved them. So looking quickly at key bindings, when I originally implemented this, I tried using a key listener. The problem with key listener is that there's problems with focus. So if the component that you're implementing key listener for does not have focus, then it doesn't work. Key bindings eliminate that problem. So essentially each component has a input map where you map keystrokes to action name strings. So this is the W key, the S key, and so I'm mapping the W key to this action string, player 1, move up. This second, or I'm sorry, the third parameter, this Boolean, if it's false, it's key pressed. If it's true, it's key released. So we have a keystroke for pressing the W key, which moves player 1 which maps to a action name called player one action up, and then the key released action name is P1 stop action. So when you release the button, the action is stop. So these actions are then mapped to an action map. So you can see I've created P1 move up action name here. That's the input map that's associated with a component. The action map is where that action name is mapped to a move action, which implements the action interface. So here's the move action. So for those player one actions, well, for both player one and player two actions, it takes a paddle and an action, and then the move action just has properties for paddle and action. So when you press the key, like you press the W key, you can see down in the console, it'll do a system out print line that will basically tell you what the action is associated with what you're doing. Putting system out print lines in the console is just a great way to do simple debugging without actually running the debugger, which is a little harder when you're running a interactive game on a timer. The breakpoints really mess up the game itself. So in the action performed, if the action is equal to move up, then the paddle's motion Y parameter or property is set to -1, which causes the paddle to move up. We can go back to well, let's just go to the paddle move. So when we move, it's like the ball. The Y position is incremented by the move amount, and the move amount is equal to the speed times motion Y. So if motion Y is -1, then the speed goes there. The Y position is subtracted -1 times speed, which is set to 10. So the Y position goes up 10. And then the other thing I wanted to talk about is the paint component, which I've updated for a couple things. One is to determine if the ball's hitting the paddle, and then the other one is to keep score. And so I've just added some logic, and I don't know if this is the best place to put the logic, but I didn't think that in order to put this logic in the ball, I had to pass the paddle to it, and that didn't seem right. So it seemed like it would be better to put it in the class that contained the ball and the paddle. So first thing I did is do a check to see if the ball's X motion is moving to the right. So then I want to check if the ball is either hitting the right wall, in which case I increment the score, or it's hitting the right paddle. So I get the paddle position, and then I have some logic here to check if the ball is hitting the paddle by checking the ball's x coordinate and adding the width, because the ball has a width of, I believe, 20. So if the X position is greater than or equal to the paddle's X position, and the ball's Y position is greater than or equal to the paddle's Y position and less than or equal to the paddle's Y position plus the height, then that essentially means the ball hit the paddle, so then we reverse the motion. If that's not the case and the ball has hit the wall, then we increment the score. So just quickly on the score, I'm using the graphics object drawString to keep track of the score. And so all I'm doing is calling drawString and getting the score. The score gets incremented each time the ball hits the wall. So there's a lot of other enhancements we could do. One main thing, since we're talking about swing, is I thought it would be cool to add a file menu that allows you to modify the game parameters, like increase the speed of the ball, which would make it harder to play. Um, uh, Maybe one other thing I was thinking of is the ball could have a variable speed. So for player one, the ball could move at medium speed. For player two, the ball could move at a faster speed or something along those lines. But the idea is to use swing menus to set parameters for the game. Anyway, that's it. Let me just pop the game up one more time and see how I do. There are some bugs still in the game that haven't worked out. I'll probably work on it more later. Well, I'm not doing very well. Anyway, that's it. Catch you next time on Kicking with Computer Science.